And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Boston Street in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. Tonight we'll tell a little bit of local and a little bit of national. Joining me at 6:30, John Riches, of course, of the Goldwater Institute. He's in charge of litigation. He's going to talk free speech. He's going to talk SCOTUS. He'll join us for a little bit. After that, House candidate Darrell Gold, full disclosure, corporate sponsor of this show, will appear and be talking about some of the challenges and issues facing Warren, Bristol, and of course the great state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. 7:30 tonight. Tom Mahan. This week we're restarting a segment that we call Libertarian Fabulous. And there's no one quite as fabulous as Tom Mahan. For our libertarian audience out around the country, Tom has been a longtime activist, had the catbird seat, if you will, in both 2012 and 2016 presidential elections, national conventions. So it's going to be a little bit of inside baseball on the national libertarian scene. Facebook.com/Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. CoalitionRadio.us, the mothership, where these and all other shows live in perpetuity. Please like us, please share us, please follow us. As a longtime member of independent media, long time, I guess by independent media standards anyway, it's critical for us in order to compete with the big boys. You know, the one who give you 3-minute sound bites of issues as opposed to half-hour and 45-minute extrapolations and in-depth discussions. Then we need your support in social media, and it's simple as enough to do. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. Please like us there. Please follow us at Coalition_radio on the Mighty Mighty Twitter. And of course, CoalitionRadio.us, where you'll find a link to our YouTube channel. You'll see last week's conversation with Rhode Island gubernatorial candidate Matt Brown. It was an interesting conversation. The amount of time we had gave him full rein to explain a number of his philosophies, core beliefs. He and I sort of engaged in a little friendly back and forth when it came down to what businesses are looking for in terms of motivating factors to come to Rhode Island, to employ people in Rhode Island. But I got a real sense that here's a guy who's taking a shot, clearly willing to challenge Gina on a philosophical basis, and clearly willing to kick her butt morally. But that's another. This was a fascinating week in Rhode Island. Last week we were at the Libertarian National Convention, away from the Sturm and Drang of Rhode Island politics. So we missed the great endorsement debate. My only comment on that, I watched the state electoral system being twisted in order to be used to either validate or invalidate who private political parties endorse. Anyone who's watched the show knows that I'm the chairman of a local affiliate of a national third party. I question the wisdom, the integrity, the financial sense of the efforts that we go through as taxpayers to support what is largely two private organizations. Yes, political parties are private organizations, a point that was brought home to us both in the run-up to Ms. Clinton and Orange Cheeto's nominations for the candidacies for the presidency in 2016. In the case of the Democratic Party, much was made about the superdelegates. Take, for example, the state of Rhode Island, where Bernie Sanders won overwhelmingly, but despite that was not granted the delegates, quite frankly, he should have. In Rhode Island, on the Republican Party, those few people casting votes for the Cheeto, again, they see this as largely a private party choice. So why is we, as taxpayers, supporting this? The two parties operate at a philosophical loggerheads. There's no interest in working together to achieve solutions. When you get past rhetoric, quite frankly, they're two sides of the same coin, as a wise man once said, the cool moose. So we, in a state that's as financially challenged, impaired as Rhode Island, should use precious resources to support these two organizations? A move was made in the Libertarian Party National Convention, America's third largest party, I might add, with 4.5 million Americans voting for a Libertarian candidate in 2016. A move was made by a few misguided folks, I'm sure their heart was in the right place, to incorporate superdelegates into our scheme. The move was crushed, obliterated, annihilated. Or as the clickbait tapes like to say, it was eviscerated. There is no place in the Libertarian Party for superdelegates. We are not going to create some royalty. We are meritocracy. So it is my suggestion this year, after some personal experiences up on Halitosis Hall, where the Democrats try to backdoor the elimination of a statutory requirement for a published platform, we will be active this year in drawing out and comparing and contrasting the issues surrounding financial legal support of two private political organizations. In reality, Rhode Island is not a two-party state. Rhode Island's a 5 or 6 party state. After the events in Endorsement Gate last week, it's clear that there are two Democratic parties, a progressive party, and the old, stale, tired, corrupt, calcified Democratic Party. There's also a Green Party. There's the Libertarian Party. At least for the time being, there's the Moderate Party. And in past years, we've had the Compassion Party, the Reform Party, and the Coal Moose Party. And there exists, even today, a significant independent electorate. I believe it was around 23% of the votes cast for the gubernatorial race 4 years ago were cast for Moderate Party candidate Bob Healy. So this is not some insignificant minority. This is not some shattering class. These are folks who are seriously independent. Not just casually, but seriously independent. There is a core constituency of voters in Rhode Island who are looking for a solution, looking for a hero or a heroine. They're looking for leadership. And I believe this election will continue that trend of further balkanizing the political system here in Rhode Island as we look at both major parties for the failure they are. Now, some of my best friends are Republicans, but I would be remiss if I did not point out that Republicans voted for gun control, Republicans voted in favor of the budget, and Republicans in the past have supported things like the opioid bill. They've worked to repress the Good Samaritan law. They've worked against the legalization of cannabis. Republicans have a number of times looked to crush the civil liberties, particularly in the form of the Fourth Amendment. And on a national basis, Republicans just nominated a judge who, quite frankly, has real issues with the Fourth Amendment. The Democratic Party, for all their noise about supporting minorities, worked their best to avoid endorsing marriage equality, has actively funded and actively contributed to the war on drugs, and does nothing really but give lip service. And here in Rhode Island, locally, it was a Democratic Attorney General who pushed this opioid, this horrific opioid bill, who worked to let the sunset provision lapse in the Good Samaritan bill, who supports the creation of a DNA database, and who actively lobbied and successfully passed legislation that allowed for warrantless searches of a Rhode Islander's prescription medical history through the prescription medical database. So both parties share in the failure. You'll hear Democratic progressives claim that the true Democratic Party does not represent the real democratic movement. Why, therefore, then, did a significant majority of self-describing, self-identifying political progressives vote in favor of a stadium subsidy for billionaires. Any other situation, they call it corporate welfare. You got me. Meanwhile, the Republicans complain about 70 years, the single party rule, 70 years of single party rule. Well, whose fault is that? Has the Republican Party consistently presented a vision that Rhode Islanders are willing to adopt? I would argue no. And while there's been many a fine Republican legislator, I would have the privilege in the final couple of nights of the session to stand on the floor and chat with them. It clearly hasn't been enough. And after the events of the last few weeks, we see a Republican Party that's clearly at war with each other. As small as they are, it's been balkanized and divided into 3 or 4 of its own schisms. So, it's time for the state to stop subsidizing the existence of the 2 failed principal political parties and create a level playing field. Republicans are always talking about level playing fields. Create a level playing field politically so that individual Rhode Islanders can coalesce around the charges, the causes, the issues that they support and have equal access to the halls of justice. Because as we know, in the halls of justice, justice is in fact in the halls. And that needs to happen right away. We know that it won't. We know that it will be a struggle. It is, however, a struggle that people of goodwill who don't fall into the conventional duopoly, Democrats, Republicans, who aren't obsessed with the war of personalities, the Cheeto versus HRC, who don't drown themselves in moral relevancies. For example, the Republicans who can't wait to point out that while the behavior of their president may suck, that Hillary did something similar. When in fact we remember a time when they campaigned on simply being better. The entire premise, seemingly the entire raison d'existence for the 2 political parties is that they're not each other. There's no hope, there's no vision. There's no there, as they say. So in light of that, in light of really a generational failure by each political organization to truly fulfill the wisdom and the vision that they portray and permeate for their supporters, there must be other solutions. And as a society and a body politic, we need to get out of the way, remove barriers to entry, remove obstacles for those other options to grow. Rhode Island is at a crossroads. And those crossroads are a function of the failure of these 2 organizations, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, to actively support the creation of an environment where individuals, the ultimate minority by the way, can prosper, and instead obsess over creating a permanent party structure that will lead to power for individuals. It's a failure. It will continue to be a failure. And offers no hope for whatever, for Rhode Island to rise out of the miasma that we're currently in. Come to this week, and we now see our governor implicated, if you will, guilt by association or actual fault, in a pay-to-play issue. And I listened today on talk radio. No secret I'm a fan of talk radio, and I'm not unwilling, I should say, to endorse listening to other shows. Matt Allen, compelling radio. Dan York, compelling radio. Dan York, the man so many people love to hate, but can't help but listen to. Tara Granahan, providing lively conversation. A young man was filling in today for Matty Allen. And predictably, we had people calling in all morning saying, we've got to, if you've been doing the community activist thing for a while, the speeches are almost by rote. We've got to rise up. Rhode Islanders have to fill in the blanks. Rhode Islanders need to fill in the blanks. Well, it's that time of the year. If in fact you think Rhode Island needs to essentially encourage real fundamental change, stop waiting for other people to do it. I can tell you at the Libertarian Party, lpri.us, there's ample opportunity for volunteerism. We won't ask you for any money. If you'd like to contribute to our candidates, we'd love that at lpri.us. But before we even get to that point, show up, count, be involved. And if the Liberty Movement and the Libertarian Party is not your cup of tea, okay. There are other grassroots organizations that are desperate for your support, financial or volunteer. Absolutely desperate. So turn off the computer after you're done listening to this show. Get off of social media after you've followed the Coalition Radio. But get off your backside. The hashtag for the show is Take It Personally. It's time for everyone in this audience to take it personally. We will not affect fundamental change by the actions of a few. And if your response is on November whatever, to simply point out and say cynically, I knew this was going to happen, well then guess what? You're the problem. John Laughlin, who I consider a friend, was teasingly, mercilessly, a couple weeks ago when the big vote came down, the big, the orchestrated support of this hellish version of the Paw Sox Stadium was created. And I think without meaning it maliciously, saying, well, we knew, I knew. Well, congratulations. I'm not trying to single him out, but we kind of knew too. We knew the odds were long. We knew that it wouldn't be an easy fight. But if for any moment you don't think you can be involved in fundamental change, then reflect on one simple fact. 3 or 4 years ago, when Paw Sox Stadium 1.0 came out, Pawtucket Red Sox and their heathen followers wanted something around the neighborhood of $120 million. 4 years later, and a whole lot of money on their behalf, they're probably going to get somewhere around 80. So yeah, it looks like for the time being we lost. But look what's happened in the interim. First of all, you can argue that we saved the state somewhere between $30 and $50 million, depending on estimates. That's a whole lot of money for a bunch of people with Facebook accounts. Number two, there are folks now who will tell you that government has no place whatsoever being involved in private markets. And while that may seem mundane, that thought in a socialist workers' paradise like Rhode Island is simply revolutionary. People will point out that corporate cronyism doesn't work. People will point out there's no such thing as ancillary development. Did we ultimately win? No. And I don't consider a win the Paw Sox leaving and going to Worcester. The win ultimately was for the Paw Sox to realize their evil ways and simply build a state-of-the-art facility in Pawtucket using their own damn money. That, to me, was the win. So no, we did not win. But we changed the argument. We raised the argument. And I think we fundamentally changed how people feel and how people understand this type of quote-unquote governance. So the next challenge that's upon us in just a few short months, and it'll be here before we know it, is what happens in November. You can continue to accept mediocrity in the form of Gina Raimondo. You can continue at a local level to vote in your guy because they're your guy at the General Assembly, despite almost a near universal failure in both thought, philosophy, and integrity. There are some good people in that body, but it's getting harder to find. So it's great to say you're going to remember in November. It's great to rant on, to throw the bombs out. It's great to argue with people at Facebook. It's great to to put a post up there and call her Gina Tolmundo or Queen of Tolmundo or whatever the latest name du jour is. But if you're not willing to get off your ass and actually do something about it, put a little skin in the game, as they say, a little money, a little time, whatever suits you, then I don't want to hear you bitch. Folks, we're going to take just a couple of minutes break right now. We're going to get set up. John Riches from the Goldwater Institute is going to be joining us. Not sure how long we'll have him, 15, 20 minutes. He runs their litigation department, and he's got some insight about free speech. I'm going to try and pin him down a little bit on SCOTUS. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network, here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Boston Street, in the heart of the city we love, La Prov. It's a beautiful night here in Providence. So if you haven't found your way to the Cape, if you're not down in South County, it's a wonderful opportunity to enjoy everything Providence has to offer. Outdoor dining, perhaps a few adult cocktails, it's all here. We're blessed to live here. We just need to fine-tune some little things. So folks, stay tuned. Coming up, John Riches will be back in just a couple minutes. Thank you. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media. Of course, as always, broadcasting in the worldwide Coalition Media headquarters here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Joining us via the miracle of audio Skype is someone who's been with us before and provided keen legal insight into a world filled with armchair experts, quite like myself, who are not experts. We simply try to play one on, well, pick your media, radio, TV, or in this case, indie media. It's great that there's some adults in the room who can kind of swim through the talking points and the nonsense and actually point out, well, what's really important and what works. John Riches is clearly that individual. He's Director of National Litigation for the Goldwater Institute. And of course, for folks who've watched this show over the years, we are blessed by their continued participation in providing us the kind of insight that you typically won't get on soundbite media. We've got a couple issues today. John's somewhat limited in time, so we want to get right to it. First and foremost, you guys are on the bleeding edge as part of your, I call it the three-war front. You folks research, you opine, you litigate, and you legislate. When I say legislate, you've got an entire business model that provides model legislation for state legislators to adapt. When I talk about research and write and investigate, you've got an entire division dedicated to your own independent journalistic efforts. And in your case, you litigate. You litigate, as we like to say, this is a Northeastern thing, you litigate the snot out of some things. And it's outstanding to see people on the front lines. You know, it's been said by many, we say it at the Coalition, clearly in the halls of justice, justice is in the halls. And you're going to update us in a case in Florida, where I think the last time you and I talked about that, we were worried about, did in fact video really kill the football star? So if you can give us a quick overview of that again and talk about where we are in this case.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, and thanks for the kind words too. I think it is very, very effective to be able to have, the way we do here at Goldwater, all of those different hats under one roof. It just really allows you to move public policy, advance constitutionally limited government principles, and protect individual liberty in a way that you couldn't do if you were just doing one of those three things. So I appreciate that. Regarding the De La Haye case, so you might recall Donald De La Haye is a former football kicker for University of Central Florida, and UCF kicked Donald off its football team, rescinded his athletic scholarship, and gave him less than 3 days to move off of campus housing, which was then the only housing available to him, because he made YouTube videos that were popular enough to receive ad revenue. The university claimed that Donald's social media videos, which, by the way, he had made long before he was ever a UCF student, violated NCAA rules, and they then made that judgment and kicked him off the team. That, in our view, is a real problem under the First Amendment. You can't have public universities telling students that they can't communicate about their life as a student in the way that every student in the country now communicates, which is on social media and social media platforms. So we brought a case on Donald's behalf against the university, and just this past week, the federal judge in the Middle District of Florida denied the university's attempts to get that case dismissed, so we are now off and running on the merits.
Excellent. Now, there seems to be, and first of all, is UCF under the guidelines of the NCAA?
UCF is a member institution of the NCAA, so they're obligated to comply with NCAA rules, but of course, they can make their own decisions about their own students. They can make their own decisions about scholarships that they award to students. And really more importantly, the member institutions of the NCAA drive the NCAA rules, not the other way around. It's the institutions that propose rules. It's the institutions that propose amendments to rules. It's really not a tail wagging the dog situation here. It's the dog wagging its own tail.
Right. So do you find that, and this is kind of a general rule, are there a number of institutions that will often hide behind the NCAA as the bogeyman when, in fact, as you point out, they do still have local control?
It happens all the time, and it's happening in this case. The UCF argued in its motion before the court that, hey, you can't blame us. We were just following NCAA rules. We were able to uncover through a public records request done prior to the case that, in fact, that wasn't true. The university made its own decision with respect to Donald and it wasn't the NCAA that made the decision in this case. Now, look, I'm no defender of the NCAA. I think it's a real problem. I think it benefits off the backs of other people's work. But in this case, the university is a responsible party.
Right. So now that you're able to go forward and argue the merits of the case, is this solely a First Amendment case, or if you can give us an overview of the quote-unquote merits of what you're going to argue this on?
Yeah, it's solely a First Amendment case now. We had originally brought two claims, one of which was dismissed, a substantive due process claim, essentially for technical reasons. It was dismissed, but yeah, so it is now solely a First Amendment claim. So what that means is if the government, in this case the university, is going to discriminate against somebody's speech or tell them what they can or can't have on their own personal social media platforms, what the law says is you better have a very compelling reason to do that, government, and whatever restriction you used to limit this person's speech, better very carefully advance that reason. So in this case, the university, we know, restricted Donald's speech. The question is, did they have a compelling reason to do that? Here, what happened is they could have allowed Donald to remain a student at UCF, regardless of the NCAA or anything else. They could have allowed him to continue to receive his scholarship, which was promised to him and which he used as the sole means to finance his education, but they chose not to do that. And the reason they chose not to do that is because it would have counted against their football financial aid limits, the amount of money they could give out for football scholarships. In our view, that's not a sufficient government reason to restrict the free speech of students.
Now, and not to obsess over the NCAA, but one last question down that track. It's interesting, we've got some litigation pending here in the state of Rhode Island where the National Trucking Association is suing the state. And you know, you've got the real potential for other people to, in layman's term, file friend of the court briefs to sort of weigh in because of the far-reaching implications of some tolling issues here in the state. If this is you know, if the truth and I should say the plaintiff in this case, you know, wins and truth and righteousness prevails here in America, and in fact we can continue the American way, is this a dangerous precedent for the NCAA? And do you expect at any point in time the NCAA to weigh in on any technical level of the case?
To your first question, yes, it certainly is. If a court orders a public university to, it determines that a public university's actions in purported compliance with these rules violate the Constitution, yeah, I think the NCAA will have no choice but to review and revise its rules, which are extraordinarily broad, which limit free speech in so many different ways at public universities. So yes, to that question, in terms of whether the NCAA can weigh in, yes, they can. They could actually attempt to become a party in the case if they felt that they had a sufficient interest to protect by intervening in the case, or they could file what you had mentioned, which is a friend of the court or an amicus brief, where they would they could state whatever they thought would be helpful to resolution of the case and whatever their unique interest was in it.
Right. So here at the coalition, we've got a layman's love of the law, and what I find so intriguing about this is how the ordinary events of an ordinary young man who is skilled at literally kicking a ball to the point where it had the ability to potentially afford him a free college education from a fine state university. UCF has got a very good reputation in the world of Florida higher education. How the actions of I'll call it the corporate state, and can weigh down on one individual, and the far-reaching implications of that. The NCAA is a multi-billion-dollar business. It's possibly one of the great, outside of say baseball and the NFL, it's one of the large, almost seemingly bulletproof, seemingly unassailable institutions that has such broad control over such a significant part of the economy. Again, one ordinary man can literally change the world in this case. You're entering this case arms a-blazing, so clearly you think you will prevail. And as someone who's looking at this top side, it seems remarkably straightforward. What are they hanging their hat on at this point? Because there's so much at stake in the form of a precedent.
It's. I don't want to speculate for the university. We don't exactly know what their merits arguments are going to be yet because we haven't seen them. So the opening salvo that they attempted was to point the finger at the NCAA. That didn't work. So now they're going to have to double back and argue or justify how telling a kid that he can't communicate on social media, how that is going to square with the First Amendment. And frankly, we're as interested in you as you are in seeing how they're going to justify that. I think they will continue to attempt to point the finger at the NCAA. And again, plenty of blame to go around. There's plenty of reforms that need to be done with NCAA rules, but that's not going to work for them. They're the public institution. They're the government. They're the entity that must comply with the Constitution. And if they don't, they're the one that ought to be held responsible. Think about it, Pat, in any other context. Imagine if there was an NCAA rule that said students of a particular religion or race or gender or you name it couldn't compete in some particular fashion. And a public university turned around and said, oh, it's just the NCAA rules that we're following. I don't think that would fly, and it's not going to fly here.
Interesting. So this is going to be held in federal district court? Is that the next step on the Trail of Tears here?
That's where we're at. Yeah, we're in federal district court in the Middle District of Florida, and the next step, because the university's motion was denied, is for us to proceed through what's called discovery, where we get information from the university, and they can request information from Donald.
Right. I would imagine for the university, this is, and we're always sort of fascinated by this because, we're big fans of the ACLU here as well, and we see institutions, whether it be governmental, educational, constantly immerse themselves in all sorts of pointless battles to defend really bad laws or really bad policies, and cost themselves a fortune in doing so. I understand that they probably got in-house counsel, but this is when you get to the district court level. At that point in time, I'm assuming you're going out of house and you're working with law firms who specialize in this issue. What does it cost a university to fight something like this ballpark? Any idea?
It's got to be a lot, and they have hired outside counsel for this case at a very large law firm. So I agree with you. I don't know, from a business decision alone, it's pretty remarkable that they're trying to defend this action, and they continue to try and defend this action now. I think it's going to cost them much more than it has to.
Right. And then after I'm assuming they lose this, I mean the discovery process alone is going to be, the notion of a public university having to go through public discovery as a civil libertarian, or I should say as a civil libertarian hobbyist like myself, is kind of distasteful that you have to use the courts to force what should be, and what's the worst word of 2017, an organization that should be transparent. It's dilatory at best to force them into this type of discovery. I mean, what's happened to our university system? And I know you guys are also on the front lines of fighting free speech codes and things like this. Do they just assume they're above the fray? What's their mindset on a battle like this?
It's almost impossible to say. I think what happens is, like you do at any large institution that has some degree of notoriety, I think you just get a remarkable degree of hubris at some point, and that affects decision making. I don't know if that's the case here or not, but I think that is commonly what happens.
So if they lose here, then what does it go to the Court of Appeals? Is that the next step?
So right now, because they lost their motion to dismiss, they could, if they wanted, they could appeal it to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, the U.S. Circuit Court for the 11th Circuit. If they choose not to do that, then we will just proceed in the trial court, in district court, on the merits. And the next thing that would probably happen after discovery is one or both parties would move for what's called summary judgment, right. Meaning that, look, everybody agrees the facts are what they are. The university kicked Donald out. They kicked him out for these reasons. Did that violate the First Amendment or not? And this judge alone could decide that question. Wouldn't have to go to a jury because it's just a pure legal question. There's no factual dispute.
Right. Wow. That's just astonishing. again, and this is what's key here. Now, I can't imagine, just to get a pitch in here for fundraising, or we call it development when we're at the think tank level. But this can't be inexpensive on your behalf either, though. What's your relationship with the, for the lack of a better term, the plaintiff? Are you doing this in a sense in the public interest?
Oh yeah, 100%. Our representation is provided to Donald pro bono. In fact, the Texas Public Policy Foundation is our co-counsel. They are another nonprofit organization. We have local counsel in Florida who is a private attorney out there. He's providing his services pro bono. So yes, there's an enormous amount of resource investment in terms of time and man hours being made in the case, and it's our view that this is plainly in the public interest. If we're successful here, then it will not only allow us to have righted a wrong that happened to Donald, but it will assure student athletes across the country that they're not going to have to check their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate just because they happen to play a sport and play it well.
Right, and this, folks, is why it's so critical to support institutions like Goldwater, because I worked in a professional firm environment myself. To date myself. Years ago, I worked in the Big 8 accounting, and I'm not sure if folks are cognizant of the support structure that's necessary, and just, for example, in terms of legal research, or for example, in terms of the costs incurred with and the logistical requirements for court filings. All of that is a real out-of-pocket, real dollar cost, and it's clear that the government, in this case, the University of Central Florida, is not acting, and we're not going to demonize them, but it's clear that that whole fairness thing that we talk about, that compact between the individual and government, isn't exactly working here right now. So in the absence of organizations like Goldwater, then you're left up as an individual to fight for your own rights. And the costs involved are enormous. They're staggering, which is why folks need to support organizations like this in any way, shape, or form. Because, and we're talking about money here, because it costs money to do this. And that's why, in the absence of organizations like Goldwater or the ACLU, who are willing to do work on pro bono basis, the individual rights of everyone, and I hate to use the word collectively as a libertarian, but collectively will suffer. And I just want to point out, too, that I'm as guilty as anybody as making lawyer jokes, but in the history of this show, as I've spent more time with the folks at Goldwater and with the folks at the ACLU, one has to appreciate the love of the law mixed in with a strong case of civil justice, that folks literally at their own expense in their own time pursue cases simply because, are you ready for this? It's the right thing to do. Shocking in the year 2018, but there exists a large body of attorneys, never enough, and they're grotesquely overworked because in the meantime they've got to figure out a way to pay the bills as lawyers, who are willing to make these extreme efforts to stand up for change your life in ways that you may never even really understand or comprehend. So my hat's off to you, and we'll continue to touch with this. Have you got? I know you're pressed on time. Do you have just a couple minutes to give your interpretation on the latest SCOTUS pick?
Sure. Yeah, I can give you my thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I'm just going to tee this up and say there was near universal support, at least from the Liberty perspective, on his predecessor, the prior appointment, Mr. Gorsuch. That doesn't seem to be the case here with the current nominee. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I will say that the president did a wonderful job in choosing Justice Gorsuch in terms of the last go-around. And you're right, it does seem like there was very little criticism from conservative quarters, however that's defined. So, and I think Justice Gorsuch has already proven in this one term alone to be just a remarkable justice. I think Brett Kavanaugh is a very, very good judge. I think he's incredibly brilliant. I think his jurisprudence is very encouraging in some areas, and the one area that is important to us, where he's been particularly good, is administrative law. I think there's been a sea change in judges, including conservative judges, being willing to question the administrative state, being willing to question the deference that's provided to decisions made by the administrative state. And I think Judge Kavanaugh has shown that he's willing to do that on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. So that's encouraging.
What about the and I'll, I don't know if I've ever asked you this question, but when I routinely when I speak to attorneys, particularly folks like yourself who operate at such a high level, if you were to pick out the amendment, if you will, that that is most under attack, first, second, fourth, ninth, 14th, you name it, which amendment do you think is on the endangered species of constitutional rights right now?
Gosh, that's really tough to say. It's a really strange thing what's happened in the last several decades. It's the court has gone through this exercise where it has said some rights are deserving of heightened scrutiny, right to free speech, other First Amendment rights, and other rights like economic freedom under the 14th Amendment or equal privileges or the Privileges and Immunities Clause. That's really not entitled to any protection at all. Second Amendment is maybe somewhere in between that. Look, in our view, the Constitution didn't rack and stack the value of certain rights. The Constitution said we have these inherent rights, and they're all worthy of equal protection. And the courts have simply messed that up. So it is troubling, both from a historical perspective and what that means today, that courts have continued to diminish the value of some rights when you compare them to others. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but in our view, if a right's provided under the Constitution, if a right is inherent and has received constitutional protection, it should be afforded meaningful judicial protection.
So we take a great deal of concern here, particularly here in the Northeast, on the Fourth Amendment, the right to protection from illegal search and seizure, and where Justice Kavanaugh seems to be under somewhat, I wouldn't call it a siege, but under questioning is his handling of the brave new world of the digital world in terms of Fourth Amendment protections. Are you concerned as a judge by that, or do you think that's overstated?
Well, I think I share your same concern that some judges have had an impulse to view Fourth Amendment rights as deserving of less protection if the government articulates some nebulous national security justification. Of course, the government is always going to say, look, this has to do with national security or public safety. Look, the whole purpose of the Fourth Amendment is to prevent against government intrusion when it does include matters of national security or public safety. The Fourth Amendment would be meaningless if it didn't afford protection, even if there's a compelling government reason for trying to get information. So yes, I do share that concern with you. I do not know what a Justice Kavanaugh would look like on those issues. I think there's some decisions as an appellate judge that we might have taken a different view of on the Fourth Amendment. But like you, it's I do share the concern that sometimes judges have diluted that right while not diluting others.
Right. I guess my last question, and again, I appreciate all the time. John Riches is joining us. He runs litigation at the Goldwater Institute. Without getting into the handicapping, because we try to avoid that here, your sense, given the politics of timing, there's clearly a move afoot in the chattering class for the Democrats to force the issue to move his hearings until after the midterms. From your sense as someone who spends a lot of time at the national level, do you think that's a serious concern for the Trump administration, particularly given how many seats are now in question in the Senate? Do you think that'll potentially challenge his nomination?
Well, I'm a policy man and a legal man. I don't like to play the politics, but I don't see any principled reason why this nominee shouldn't get a quick hearing. I don't see any principled reason why the hearing should be put off until after the midterms. The Senate right now is controlled by the same party that occupies the White House, and they should give this nominee a quick hearing, in my view.
Excellent. And it's always fascinating for me to go back in the history and who might have voted in favor of him when he was at a lower, say, the appellate court level, and getting that nomination. Now all of a sudden has this reborn deathbed conversion to opposition when it gets to the level of SCOTUS. It's deep is the hypocrisy amongst the chattering class. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, 12 years on what many people consider the second most important court in the country, and there's no major opposition. But all of a sudden there is now. I think you're right. That does point to a pretty high level of hypocrisy.
Right, and one, you have to be of a certain age to understand the term "borked" as a verb. But it'll be interesting to see if the Democrats try to bork Mr. Kavanaugh. That remains to be seen. John, as always, I want to thank you for coming on. Your time is so precious, and we are grateful that you choose to share it with us. And your insight is so welcome up here in Socialist Workers Paradise of Rhode Island, where it's a little difficult at times to get your type of insight into what's happening in the legal world. Please keep us abreast of the UCF case. Again, I see astonishing ramifications for this. It'll be fascinating to see at what point does ESPN start talking about it, because when that happens, then you know the NCAA is in trouble. So congratulations on all your efforts. Where can folks find you at the Goldwater Institute?
Well, thanks, Pat, and thank you very much for all the kind words and for the invitation to come on and talk today. We are at www.goldwaterinstitute.org, and from there you can navigate and find our cases and our issues and all the other stuff.
Yeah, and bookmark the site. It should be required appointment reading. It's brilliant insight, and yet so very, very accessible. It's great stuff. John, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks for all you do. Have a great weekend.
You too. Folks, that was John Ritson. Of course, he is with the Goldwater Institute. Folks, required reading. If you're the type that complains about media bias and the general low level of reporting that takes place on a national level, well, it's time to change the way you look at things. There's great institutions like the Goldwater Institute, Reason.com, FIRE. Go to where original thought takes place, not where someone trying to, in their own dumbed-down manner, try and understand someone like John Ritson. When you play tennis, you try to play tennis against someone who's better than you. Well, goldwaterinstitute.org. Folks, we're going to take a very quick break. We're going to try and get Daryl Gould on the line right now. Daryl, of course, is running for the General Assembly as a libertarian. Not a liberalitarian, a libertarian. So, stay tuned, folks. Hopefully, we'll be right back. And then, of course, at 7:30, Tom Mahan is going to be joining us. He is, like myself, a libertarian curmudgeon. You're listening to the Coalition. You're watching the Coalition. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage, porn-free, and as always, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center. We only got them for about 20 minutes or so, so joining us on the line is General Assembly candidate Darrell Gould. Darrell is running from the Bristol-Warren districts. We're going to get into a little bit of the race for about 20 minutes or so. He's going to be joining us regularly here on the air throughout the election, in addition to Billy Hunt and a number of other candidates who we think are moved well beyond the sort of gangsta machine politics that have been epitomized in Rhode Island politics for so many generations, and brings, as we like to say, brighter brights, new ideas, new thoughts, brave new world here to Rhode Island. Darrell, thanks for coming on. Full disclosure, by the way, Darrell is the principal behind airsciences.net, and he is, in fact, a longtime sponsor of this show. Folks, if you're listening to this show, either now or in the future, and you're running for office and you'd like to join us, regardless of which side of the aisle you may find yourself on, feel free to reach me at coalitionradioshow@gmail.com. Again, that's coalitionradioshow@gmail.com. If you're on the ballot, we want to hear from you. Darrell, again, you're running again. It was kind of a surprise to some.
And thanks again for having me, Pat. And actually, not to correct you right out of the gate, District 67 is actually Barrington and Warren. 68 is Warren and Bristol, which is the district that Billy is running at.
Okay. All right. So you'd think I know this by now, but the East Bay.
I know it all runs together, especially when we're running successive districts on a regular basis.
Right. It's all kind of, the East Bay is kind of one happy group of people with great food, beautiful sunsets, and really where life is charming all the time. But there are challenges facing, and you've decided to step up again. First of all, congratulations for having the balls to do that. Quite frankly, I believe that running for office, I've said this before, is one of the great examples of true patriotism in this country. What are some of the issues that you're going to be focusing on this time around? You did very well at three-way last time, but what concerns you now?
It's interesting because it's a three-way race. The incumbent being Jason Knight, who was obviously the winner back 2 years ago. Jan Malik is running again as an independent. So he will unless something changes, he will make it through to the general. So there'll be no primary. It'll be a three-horse race again. So it's a little different than last time. I've evolved politically a little bit. 2 years isn't a long period of time, but a lot can certainly happen in a couple of years. So, I'm in a slightly different place than I was a couple of years ago. I'm looking at Jason Knight instead of an unknown attorney taking his first crack at it. Now we kind of have an idea as far as who he is and his voting record and things like that, and that's what concerns me. I think, to be perfectly honest, in 2016 there was probably much more of a fire in me to run. Being a first time in, it's a lot different. You approach everything as an idealist, and no matter how much how cynical you are, there's always that part of you that believes you're the best candidate and the best person should win. And so when you see when you outperform people at debates and you see people don't have substance and they can't answer questions and they don't have solutions, you assume that you'll end up on the winning side of things. And obviously it's politics, and it's politics in Rhode Island, so there's a multiplier effect there, and it gets us where we are. But I think for me it's more about Knight's voting record than anything else. I think he gets a lot of support as a progressive Democrat, but his voting record wouldn't indicate that he's progressive at all. And maybe in areas of convenience where conveniently where there happens to be a lot of support financially for candidates who are willing to back a certain issue, like gun control. But when I think a perfect example of not representing your district is the governor has her big push for the $2 billion in school renovations. I think that's a great thing. I have a problem with the way that plan is implemented. And I'll use Barrington as a prime example of this. Barrington is a town that is very affluent, and their school system is their crown jewel, and they're always top ranked, 1 or 2 in the state. It's a fantastic, top to bottom. It's a fantastic district. Now, part of the reason why they are such a strong district is Barrington has always made the investment in their infrastructure. And to that point, they actually approved a bond for about $68 million to build a new middle school back in 2016. So the taxpayers, the taxes are going up. They understand this. Again, it's to maintain this top school district. Well, it's got to be a bitter pill to swallow when the governor comes in and says, we need, there are a lot of cities and towns that didn't take care of their stuff. So we're going to tax everybody so that we can build a bunch of schools or update a bunch of schools in Pawtucket or Central Falls, because they weren't really good with managing their assets, and these schools are falling apart. So I think it's really unfair to Barrington to ask them to take on additional tax burden to pay for schools when they were the responsible stewards of taxpayer money, and they did the right thing. So to be an individual who represents that district and not voting against it, it wouldn't have been a crucial vote, clearly, because it was overwhelmingly approved. But it's another example of not standing really for what you purport to be, or anything at all for that matter.
Right. And the question is, after this term, you have to wonder, I mean, what they purport to be something, but they really aren't. How did Jason Knight weigh in on the stadium corporate welfare project?
No, that's another perfect example. We expect people who fly certain flags to behave a certain way,
Right.
And when you say you're progressive, and at least the marketing is that progressives are for the people. They're the ones who rail against the 1%, and they're talking about income redistribution, and we got to help the people who can't help themselves. I don't get how you logically vote to take taxpayer money to support a ballpark for multimillionaires. It makes absolutely no sense. So I think sadly, I'm sure there was some point, it was certainly before I was, or maybe I caught the tail end of it. There was a time in politics, and maybe this is the best reason ever to we got rid of the master lever. Like, our Democrat doesn't stand for what a lot of people think anymore. I don't think Republicans stand for a lot of people, and we have all these subsets and labels. But I mean, at the end of the day, you really have to dig down into the individual,
right.
Which ironically is really what libertarians focus on.
Absolutely. To me, another stunning failure. As self-described, abortion rights were a critical issue for progressives. Progressives were willing to, essentially sell their soul for the stadium. Yet at the same time, it doesn't appear that he was at all successful in instigating any sort of change on behalf of abortion rights. And regardless of how you feel about that bill, and a lot of people have diverse opinions on its perspective, if in fact you self-identify as being pro-choice, and you cite a range of social issues as being your motivating factor for running, and yet you fail miserably on enacting those choices, what does that say about his either skill or his ability to work as a legislator?
Right. And I mean, and Jason's not. I've met Jason obviously a handful of times. He's a pleasant fellow, I don't hold his political views against him. It's just unfortunate he's wrong. It's really that simple. So it's a little bit different. I might be a little bit more libertarian than I was a couple of years ago. And not that that means that I'm any more extreme in my views. It's just I have a deeper understanding of maybe economics and things along those lines that I may not have had even 2 years ago. So there's been some life experience things that have happened to me, that exposed me to various aspects of law enforcement and the failures there, and seeing how inequitable police treatment is of different classes of people, and I still see the problems in our schools. And that's going to be, I think, a huge focus for me. And it's not much different than 2016, Pat. You know this. There's no other libertarians up there. I'd likely caucus with the minority party. The Democrats don't need me, and I'm probably closer to being Republican than Democrat.
I don't think you and I are invited to that Christmas dinner anymore. Yeah. Here's the other issue, and maybe tell me how you feel about this. The two Libertarian candidates running for General Assembly, yourself and Bill Hunt. What was remarkable in the rundown post-election was how you responded to questions with clear, succinct answers and ideas and solutions, and B, how unabashedly, uncompromisingly libertarian you guys are. Can you reflect on that?
I was very pleased. For 2016 was a different variety of reasons. I think the biggest thing for us was, as you know, we were really, as far as the reboot of the Libertarian Party in Rhode Island, this is the first time we're actually fielding candidates at that level. Mm-hmm. So for me, the burden that I bore was I wanted to be a good libertarian. I wanted the people behind me to know that I believed in what we believe, and I could articulate it, and I'd be effective in communicating who we are and what we stand for to people of all different walks of life. Mm-hmm. The flip side was I had to, as far as my audience, this was the first time a lot of people saw a libertarian. So, and to this day, I occasionally people, oh, you're libertarians, you're really right wing. You know, in a recent news article, Jan Malik said I was extreme right wing. I'm not right wing. There's nothing. I'm a 43-year-old single dad. I'm a business owner. I'm atheist. I'm pro-LGBTQ. As you know, we marched in Pride. Right. There's nothing right-wing about me. But I think it was probably a bit of a disingenuous comment because you know it's full well what a libertarian is, or he should. Right. Being an elected official for 20 years. But for me, it's about showing people, who we are. We're not moonbats. We're normal people. I think the biggest difference, and I think the feedback that I've gotten from people through our outreach efforts about the difference between us and the other two main parties is right now, all you hear is just hate. And I hate even saying that word because it's overused in 2018. It's just about hate. The other side stinks and they're stupid or they're ignorant or they're racist or they're bigoted or they're delicate. And it's just constant. There's all sizzle, no stick. And I think where the libertarians are different is we're solutions oriented. Right. And we're actually very inclusive. So there aren't a whole lot of people who will walk through our door, no matter how much of a misfit, society may view them as, where they wouldn't be accepted. Right. And I know that's not the case in both parties. Right. Where I think our efforts were consistent. We have a great story to tell. We have a good message. It's the beauty about libertarian candidates, and going back to what I was saying earlier about you don't know what anybody stands for anymore. As far as libertarianism, there's a very basic set of principles that you apply to everything, and it's really about aggression. If you're crossing that line, the line of aggression, that is where there is a problem. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. That's our job. The continued effort is to get out there and communicate that to people and just kind of explain who we are, what we are, give them the solutions. I think people are tired of the complaining and the bickering, and my hope is that people see me for who I am. I've always tried to fight for the little guy. I try and do what I can. Some people might not like my style, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, my heart's in the right place. I try and do the right thing. I'm always going to do right by the average person. I'm going to put other people first.
Excellent. What's the next step? You're gathering signatures right now.
Yeah. I was set back with I'm setting up some back spasms. But yeah, the goal is to get out tomorrow and Sunday and just really spend the weekend out in the neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because even though I've only run once, being involved in the Healy campaign, we were out there. So you start to recognize people, and I probably know a good dozen houses in my district scattered throughout the whole area that I know are like hardcore libertarian supporters. And it's handshakes and pats on the backs when they come to the door. So I'm excited to get back out there, see some of those people, reconnect. There's some people that I'm always going to have that. There's always going to be that logical debate going on about some issue, and that's always fun. Like I said, I'm not everybody's going to agree with me, and they shouldn't. But we'll get out there and fight the good fight and do the right thing. Get out there, get our signatures, and then we have fundraisers coming up. But if anybody's interested in learning more about me or my campaign, you can go to darylgould.com, DARYLGOULD. We are taking donations, so if you want to help us fight the good fight, we have seen a lot of support, which is interesting, outside of the district, from people who have recognized, our efforts at the Libertarian Party and the things I've tried to do as it relates to 2A, whether it's testifying or organizing, gun safety events for children and things along those. So there's a lot of support in the 2A community for us, which is nice, something I didn't have in the past. So, for anyone who's interested in supporting the cause and learning more about me, you can go to darylgould.com. You can follow me on Facebook. I'm always on there and usually posting a lot of stuff too.
Right. Now we've got a meetup coming up. That's going to be Monday evening. That's going to be
Correct.
Anytime 6:30 or so. It's going to be at Murphy's Law. Now, as we like to say in Rhode Island, it's right off of exit 27. It's the old ground round. And it's essentially it's a meetup. It's folks having a couple of beverages. Coca-Cola is my weakness, and a snack, and sitting around and just discussing the issues. And obviously, the focus begins this week on the upcoming midterm elections and just how important it is to get involved. I can't stress that enough. Now, if folks are upset and frustrated, we don't blame them, but we want them to get involved, to maybe go a little bit out of their comfort zone. You've got opportunities for volunteers, correct?
Yes. You can also sign up through the website. And you make a great point, Pat, and I heard kind of your intro earlier. I've helped, I'd like to think I helped, a handful of people and encouraged them to run for office. I've seen some people pulling out because of the reaction that they've gotten. And some of it's intimidation, but if you really want change, you have to do something. It's unfortunate that we've gotten to that point, but if you're out there and you're watching or listening, things are not going to get better anytime soon if we just keep doing the same things over and over. And so, you might not 100% agree. You might not know what a libertarian is. You might not agree with something that we believe in. Come out. We do a lot of charity work. We do a lot of outreach work. We have some great people on the team. We have to do some cool events. It's a great and a really diverse group of people. So it's a good group of people to be around. If you want to come out and you want to make a difference, I guarantee anyone out there, you will have no greater impact than if you come out and you just expose yourself to the group, and meet everybody and give a little bit of your time. I know not everybody has money, especially to spend on politics. Most people spend money on politics to make it go away, not to get more involved.
Right.
But again, roll up your sleeves. You gotta do the right thing. You gotta get involved. It's not going to happen on itself.
Absolutely. Well, Daryl, thanks again for running. Again, I consider it the highest source of patriotism, and in addition to working in the armed forces, defending our country, your willingness to put yourself out there, to campaign hard, to be principled, and as we like to say as libertarians, A, support the rights of the ultimate minority, and that's the individual, and B, work your butt off to be elected to the highest levels of power so that you can leave everyone the hell alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So it's darylgould.com. Folks, Monday night, if you're interested, joining us at the at Murphy's Law at the right off of exit 27, off of 95 in the old ground round. It's a great night, a lot of fun, and you know, get involved. The hashtag we use to close this show every Friday night is hashtag take it personally. And Daryl is clearly someone who takes it personally, both in his business life and his political life. Folks, you can be too. Join us. Daryl, thanks so much for joining me this evening.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
All right, buddy, we'll talk to you soon. Folks, we're going to take a very quick break. Coming on next is Tom Mahoney. He is, in addition to me, the curmudgeonly libertarian. We're going to talk the inside skinny on the campaigns, on being a libertarian, on the convention, the different directions the party is going in. So it's the first of our reboot of being libertarian fabulous. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born, free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and the mothership, coalitionradio.us, where these and all other shows, sometimes it takes us a while to get up there, will live in perpetuity, either in a link to our YouTube page or our past shows page, which highlights our radio days from Coalition 1.0. Folks, stay tuned. We're going to be back in just a couple minutes. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Boston Street in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, where it should have been the site for the 2020 Libertarian Convention. But that's another story. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course, the mothership, coalitionradio.us, where these and all other shows will live in perpetuity. So it is my unique privilege to kick off the second season, you will, of what we call Libertarian Fabulous with a very special guest. And Libertarian Fabulous will take place most Friday nights at around 8 o'clock, when we will have a variety of candidates and provocateurs from the Libertarian National Movement here at the Coalition Radio through the miracle of Skype, or occasionally in studio. The point being is to really get into the issues in a long-form conversation, and so that people from across the country could actually get a handle on both national leaders, national thought leaders, and also develop a consensus of support for the folks who are serious candidates for office around the country. One of the issues that became clear in the post-2016 electoral world was the fact that we had candidates running across the nation, and there was very little connection between libertarians, say, in Rhode Island and libertarians in Montana, libertarians in Florida and libertarians in Wisconsin. If we are to succeed as a movement, as a national party, we must at least bring us closer together, both for terms of fundraising, volunteerism, informational support, and sometimes just a shoulder to cry on, because that's sometimes what you need when you're in a third party. Joining me live for the very first time, someone I had the privilege to meet and not spend nearly enough time with at our national convention in New Orleans just a short week ago, is Tom Mahoney. He is a activist within the party. He's been instrumental in a number of presidential elections. Gave one of the more, from what I understand, provocative panel discussions on the realities of the last election, and clearly has some perspectives both in terms of the different caucuses that currently inhabit and run amok amongst the libertarian movement, as well as just what he thinks is a recipe for some level of success in 2020. Tom, welcome to the show. Oh, hey, we got a little sound. We got a little sound problem here.
Oh.
All right, try us again, Tom. Hey, Joe, we got us a sound problem.
That's not him.
It sounds like. What do we think's going on here? Tom, give us a thumbs up if you can hear me.
He was just on a minute ago.
Give us another.
Okay.
So you hear us. Can
you take a break? I'm going to call you.
All right, we're going to call you right back. We're going to try this one more time.
Hold on. Can you turn, there's like background noise.
That's me, actually.
That sounds from you?
No, that's actually him
I
listening
know
to me.
that. Can you turn that down?
Yeah,
Is
can
that
you?
him? Can you turn, or use headphones?
Should we call him again?
But where's that coming from? That's from him, right?
That's me talking.
I understand, that's from him. Oh, do you have something on? Do you have your computer on? Is that on with that right at the phone?
It's almost like we're on a delay of some type.
No, listen, we're just talking to you. Tom, can you try talking? Keep going.
Can he?
No, you're breaking up.
Let's try and.
Let me try to call you back. I'm not sure what happened.
What are we doing?
I hung up, but I'm calling her back.
Dialing it all, or what's it doing?
It says it's ringing.
Hmm?
It says it's ringing.
Should I tell him to call us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure why that wasn't working. Yeah, I mean, we just had people on Skype, but audio is all the same thing. Then there was some weird background noise. I think he had to put like headphones on or something.
Well, that was me in the background.
I understand, but it's coming from his computer.
Right.
It's coming from his side. So he's got to put like headphones on or something to eliminate that, because that sounded terrible. I don't understand why this is not, times of new.
What's up?
Hey, we're trying to dial you again. Can you hang up on yours?
What's that?
Are you hung up on your computer?
Well, I'm on my computer and I'm hearing you ring and now I can't pick you up on the computer.
All right. Why don't you quit Skype and go back in?
Okay.
All right, try it. Thanks, bud. When we do this show, just edit out this part. Also, we can go a little higher on me on the camera.
I mean, you have to get the screen. I had to get the screen in the back, so I can only go so high because he doesn't want the navigating. Josh doesn't want the navigating credit union sign to be in the show. Let's play it on Friday the 13th and move on with our lives. That's how I look at it. Are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Now you just turn your video on. I'm sure it's coming in a minute.
Are we good now?
Yeah, turn your video on.
Yep.
Oh,
Just
wait.
wait for your video to pick up. Hey, sometimes it takes a minute, so you might be alright.
Where's my video?
There should be like a little camera.
Yeah, and I'm looking for it. What the fuck?
On the bottom of your Skype, there's like 4 little icons. There's a microphone, a volume thing. One of them's a camera, and the other one is to hang up.
It's not.
Where's my camera thing?
We just go to audio.
All right.
There you go.
See me?
Yeah. There you go.
Are you on wireless or are you on a hard connect?
What?
That could be.
All right, let's just go to voice.
What?
Yeah, you're still breaking up. It could be your Wi-Fi. So I don't understand what else it could possibly be.
I.
Yeah, you're cutting out. Let's just hang up and we're gonna do a voice call instead of video. So just regular voice call, okay? All right, thank you. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
All right, just put up anything. If you can put up the car.
Okay. What is it? What is it? Sorry.
18533, ship it.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
Do we still got you?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a combination of video and audio might be.
It's not. It's gonna be his Wi-Fi.
Think of anything. Okay. Bring up the last one.
I can still hear you.
Yeah. We'll be live in about a minute.
All right. So no video.
Yeah, I think it's for some reason that's crapping out your system. Could be a bandwidth issue. No worries. There you go.
Well, then it's a true.
All right. Give it a shot. All right, back.
And we're back after some brief technical difficulties. We've decided to go with audio only. As we say, the miracle of Skype. So Tom, first of all, thank you for coming on. I know that you've got a pretty hectic schedule. I think we're all sort of in recovery from New Orleans. Some of us in a spiritual recovery, others perhaps otherwise. But give us a little bit about your background. You've been a fixture on the libertarian scene for a number of years. When did you decide to get involved?
As a libertarian.
Yeah, you're breaking up on us again. I don't know what happens.
Am I breaking?
Yeah, keep talking. Yeah, we're only getting about one glimpse out of every other word. You want to? Should we just have him call in from his cell phone?
I'm ready.
All right.
We're back.
Okay, we're going to try this again through the miracle of telephone. Tom, are you out there?
The miracle of 1950s telecommunications. Yes, I'm ready.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm here.
All right, so tell us, when did you become a libertarian, and when did you become, like me, a libertarian curmudgeon?
Well, I became a libertarian in 1981. I was living in Alaska, and I was a Republican when I moved up there. I moved up to Alaska in 1979, and I went from making kind of somewhat good amount of money and moved up to Alaska in 1979 when Jimmy Carter was still president. And I noticed that my tax withholding was incredibly unfair in my mind, because I went from making kind of a lot of good money and to making a lot of really good money in 1979, and I thought this was unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So Ronald Reagan became president, who was going to cut tax rates, said he'd cut tax rates, ran on a premise of cutting tax rates. But I noticed that the money I made in the first year of Jimmy Carter was, I made like $60,000, which was a lot of money back then. And then Ronald Reagan came in, and I voted for him because I was ashamed and saddened by the amount of money I was paying taxes. Reagan came in, and with all his tax rates, tax cuts, blah, 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 blah. When all was said and done, I ended up paying more money the next year under Reagan with his quote-unquote false tax cuts, which were really nothing more than tax rate cuts, but additives on the other end. And I ended up paying more money under Reagan, and I thought, this is wrong, but I happened to be in Alaska at the time with Dick Randolph and Ken Fanning, and Andre Maru actually came in a little bit later. And I learned about libertarianism in Alaska. Dick Randolph and Ken Fanning were elected libertarian state representatives in Alaska. And they opened my mind, my eyes to things like Mises and Bastiat and, the whole libertarian perception. And I was like, where have you people been all my life?
Right. So from Alaska, you had actual folks who were libertarians. Eventually, then you moved. How did you end up in New Mexico?
Well, I wound up in New Mexico because the company I was working for, Northwest Airlines, told me to go there. Mm-hmm. And I moved down there in 1986. And I joined the Libertarian Party. I sent my first $25 check-in 1981 to combat the Reagan shell game on taxes. I believed in the libertarian movement. I started reading more about it, learning more about it, and saying this makes all the sense in the world to me. And I was in New Mexico in 1986, and I was raising a family, doing what everybody does. Ron Paul ran as a candidate for president in 1988. I worked on his campaign in the sense that I was nothing more than a community organizer. I went out and got ballot access. I was that libertarian, if you want to say that. I hung door knockers and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But then in 1996, a guy named Gary Johnson came onto the picture in New Mexico.
Right.
I didn't vote for Gary Johnson the first time he ran for governor in New Mexico. So Pat asked me, why didn't you vote for Gary Johnson the first time he ran for governor?
In the name of God, given your God-given opportunity to know Gary Johnson in the early years, why did you not vote for Gary Johnson?
How could I not vote for this guy knowing what we know now?
Right.
Well, in 1996 when he ran, there was a libertarian candidate, and mind you, since 1981, I had not voted for a Democrat or a Republican in a statewide or national election until then. And there's no reason why I should vote for one in 1996, especially when this unknown guy, Gary Johnson, this businessman who made a ton of money in the public sector, all of a sudden, like a month before, the end of the story about Gary Johnson getting the Republican nomination in 96 is kind of, for people who don't know, it's kind of legendary. He approached the Republican Party in 1996, about a month before the end of the campaign, the preliminaries.
Right, the primary season.
The primaries, thank you. So I didn't care, I didn't pay attention. He got the primary nomination, and he was going to be the Republican governor nominee for. I didn't care. I didn't give a damn. Another fat cat Republican made his money in the public sector. Now he's going. I knew nothing about Gary Johnson. He's going to run in New Mexico as governor. He nosed out a victory in the primaries, and now he's running, as a Republican candidate. I did not vote for him. I voted for the Libertarian candidate. Didn't know anything about him. So Gary ends up getting elected. He becomes the first Republican governor in who knows how many years, whatever. About 5 months into his term as governor, I'm sitting in a restaurant in downtown Albuquerque. I'm having breakfast, and I grab the Albuquerque Journal, and I pick up the paper, and I look at the front page. The headline says, Manny Aragon, the headline says, Aragon calls Johnson libertarian. 4 words, front page headline. Now, Aragon, meaning Manny Aragon, he was the most powerful person in the New Mexico legislature. Nothing happened in New Mexico without Manny Aragon's approval. It was the Patron system. It was the power broker. He was everything. And now here's this guy calling Gary Johnson libertarian on the front page of the Albuquerque Journal. And let me just kind of interject here. Manny Aragon recently completed a 20-year sentence for corruption. But that's neither here nor there. It's just the way it is. So there's this headline, I'm looking at it, and I spit out my Cheerios, and I spit out my coffee, and I'm thinking, holy stuff, because you told me I can't curse. Holy stuff. This guy, Gary Johnson, is on a headline. The word libertarian, for the first time in my short existence in Albuquerque, was not only a word mentioned in the Albuquerque Journal, but it was a front page headline. And I thought, I should start paying more attention to this guy. And sure enough, I watched Governor veto spending, nonsense bill, all the good things that libertarians love to hear. This is crony capitalism. This is not worth spending a nickel on. What, are you kidding me? This is not government's job. So long story short, when he ran the second time, he was the first Republican governor, Republican candidate that I had voted for since 1981, because I thought, God damn it, we've got a libertarian governor in this state. And that's the story.
Now, he successfully completes his second term. He's term limited out. Now, he made his money. What was it? A company called Big J Contracting or something along that?
Yeah, Big J Contracting. He got, there's who is it? I'm drawing a blank now. Intel. Intel built a huge manufacturing plant in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Before Gary was governor, he made his money. He successfully bid the contract for Intel.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he got all his money. That's always been, to this day, in my mind, knowing Gary as I do, that was his nest egg. He made a ton of money off of that just by giving a good contract. And it was, fortunately, it was one of those contracts that did not have to go through the Manny Aragon Patron system. Intel was smart enough to think, man, this guy is saving us $10 million or whatever number in construction costs. Let's give it to him.
Right.
And Gary made his money there, and that's been it for him.
Right.
That was the end on for his success story as a private businessman.
Now, he successful two-term governor of New Mexico, and then what happens before the fateful decision in 2012 to join the presidential election? What's Gary doing in between?
Okay, well, that's a period when I actually got to meet Gary and know Gary.
Mm-hmm.
Gary term limited out in 2003 or whatever, and he started to do his, climb all the mountains, climb all the summits of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine, one of my clients contacted me. I owned a travel agency at the time. A friend of mine said, "Hey Tom, I'm going to send somebody by you because he liked the way I did business." He says, "I'm going to send a guy by you." He says, "You may recognize the name." And I said, "Well, who's that?" He says, "It's Gary Johnson." I went, "Whoa, really?" Yeah. No, I didn't know the name. I love the guy. He says, I'm going to send him by you to buy some tickets because he's got some trip to some bizarre place or whatever he needs to pay for. Because I own a travel agency. Okay, fine. So my staff was laughing at me at the time because when I heard he was coming by the next day, I started, rearranging my office and putting good stuff up. I put Harry Brown's book, Why Government Doesn't Work, on my desk. I was doing everything I could to impress this guy, Gary Johnson, to, let him know that the guy you're going to buy your next ticket from is someone who really appreciates and loves what you do.
Right.
And I'm getting all excited about this guy coming into my office this next day. And I think this was in 2005 or so.
Right.
And it was after Gary, Gary was 2 years out of office. He had broken his back and he was doing all this shit and whatever. Sorry, I said that word. So Gary walks into my office the next day. I didn't recognize him. This guy walks in my office, hair down below his shoulders, flannel shirt hanging out over his trousers, holes in his jeans, sneakers that needed to be thrown away or sold at an auction. And this guy walks in and he goes, "Hey, dude." And and here I am. I got a suit on at this point.
Right.
I'm meeting the former governor. And this dude walks into my office and sits in front of me, and I'm like, this is too cool. This is too cool. I was feeling like I need to bust out a joint with this guy. We need to talk. Because it was the first time I met him. So, we did our transaction and everything, and I says, "Gary, you realize I put Harry Brown's book here?" He goes, "No, I love it. It's cool. I love it. It's cool. I've been a libertarian for like 20 years, but I just never let the Republicans know about it." And I thought, even better, even better. So that was the last of my first experience with Gary Johnson until 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you want to get into that, we'll talk about that.
Absolutely. Because what I'm intrigued by here is, as I've told this story on the show before, I talked to Gary for the first time one night. I'm driving, across Massachusetts, and there's a radio station called WBZ, 50,000 watt channel. and some guy gets on the airwaves and he's talking about running for president. He started talking about the New Hampshire primary, and he's talking about personal responsibility and self-ownership and small government and vetoing stuff. And I'm like, where are they? I live here in Socialist Workers Paradise, Rhode Island. Where's this guy been all my life? So I called him up,
Right.
and that's the first time I ever got to talk to Gary Johnson. And well, the one thing about Gary is that if you've had any sort of run in him with him, however visceral, however temporal, however personal, most of the people I know who've met him or even talked to him on the phone, he leaves you changed. You're a different person, and so I'm a fanboy too. So in 2011,
it's not all right, Pat. It's not really a question of being changed by Gary Johnson. To me, it was a question of meeting the guy for the first time, seeing who he was, listening to him in whatever endeavor you engaged on. I mean, we were in a strictly business, transactional relationship. I mean, we didn't get into politics. When I did try to bring up the politics with the Harry Brown, the libertarianism, and all this, he was like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. I like it." He wasn't trying to, push any agenda on me. He just wanted to buy a ticket to somewhere. And I thought, cool. What a real person this man is. What an absolutely real person this man is. So then in 2011, I happened to be in Florida. I was, whatever, your personal things, whatever. I was doing what I was doing down here in Florida. I had been here for about 3 or 4 months. Gary Johnson announces that he's running for president as a Republican candidate. Okay, cool. You know what? I like the guy. And a website goes up, and the emails go out to everybody. We're looking for people to help with the Gary Johnson campaign. You know the routine.
right?
Anybody who has any kind of contact with Gary Johnson, we're looking for help around the country. Are you willing to help? I get the email, or I see the website, and I see the thing. So I send in a basic email. Hey, Tom Mann here, not Mahone, Ford.
I'm always going to pronounce it the Irish way.
if you're gonna talk about me, get me right. Jesus. Anyway, so I get all that, and I send a basic thing. Hey, Tom Mann here. Sorry, I'm fighting laryngitis since New Orleans.
Same here.
I spoke a little bit. So anyway, I'm in Florida in 2011, and I send in the email, hey, Tom Mann here, whatever you need, I'm willing to help, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I get a call a week later from a guy, Aaron, what's his name? He ended up leaving because he was too big a Ron Paul supporter. Anyway, Aaron calls me up and says, hey, Tom, got your email. We're excited that you want to, help out with the Gary Johnson campaign, blah, 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 blah. I said, yeah, anything I can do to help, that'd be fine. I love Gary. I'd love to help him. He says, well, we're looking for a campaign manager in Florida, and we think you'd be a good fit. And I went, really? Campaign manager? He goes, oh yeah, your resume is great. I says, well, you want to tell me, I said to him, you want to tell me a little bit about campaign managing? Because campaign managing meaning state campaign managing. We want you to be the state campaign manager. And I said, great. You want to tell me a little bit about state campaign managing? Because, I've got an extensive business, executive, whatever background, but as far as political campaign managing, I'm not sure you got the right guy. He goes, oh, no, you're fine and everything. He says, all you got to do is network and get out and meet people and everything. I said, I've been in Florida for 3 weeks. Networking? I don't even know my neighbor's name yet. So, and by the way, he's running as a Republican. I'm a Libertarian, and from what I know of the Republican Party in Florida, which I found out to be they're no better than what I consider the Taliban of America as far as religious fervor. Are you sure? I'm not sure I can actually do that. Tom, we need you to do that. Okay, I'll do it. Fine. So I was the state campaign manager for Gary at the beginning of his Florida, or beginning of his Republican campaign, and I did that for 6 months. But then I had to move back to New Mexico and give up the job. So that was the end of it at that point. When I got back to Florida, to New Mexico, I got a call from Grant Huey and Apollo Pizzell. Tom, we need you to keep working on the campaign. We have a campaign manager in New Mexico, but, you know, there's other options here for you. I says, well, I'm open to it because I'm not doing anything else. What do you got? It says, well, we need somebody to drive a campaign van. We've got 4 campaign vans situated around the country, the West, the Southeast, the East, and the Middle Mountain states, and the Rocky Mountain states in the Midwest. Will you drive a van around? And I said, well, what does that entail? That entails you're going to be on the road for the next 5 months. We can't pay you a salary. We can cover your hotel expenses as long as you don't exceed 40 or 45 bucks a night. And we'll pay for your gas and your food at McDonald's and Starbucks and whatnot. But we'd love for you to do something like that. And I said, really? So you want me to give up the next 4 or 5 months of my life, work for nothing, but get my expenses covered by traveling around the country in my area, 24 states, and meet people and push the liberty message and push the Gary Johnson message? And they said, yeah, that's exactly what you want to do. And I said, where do I pick up the keys?
So now at that point in time, he was still running as a Republican, or he had decided to?
No. He had already switched.
Right.
He had already switched. This was in like June of 2012.
Right.
He switched at Christmas of 2011, and I was in New Mexico at the time, and it was a heartwarming moment for me because it was done in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was a big thing. It was held in the rotunda of the Santa Fe State House. It was a big, relatively big press media event where Gary stood up there on the stage and signed over, officially switched from the Republican to the Libertarian Party. Mark Hinkle took his $25 check and the whole thing, and I was. When I walked into the building that day, I was a little bit late. I came in a side corner, and I was all dressed up in a suit and everything. And Gary recognized me right away. He just happened to be standing there because he recognized me because of things I did for him in Florida while I was still the state campaign director for him as a Republican. I got him into the last debate in Orlando, where he had the famous "my 2 dogs pooping" thing.
Right.
That's a story in itself. It'll take too long here how I got him into that. But he recognized me when I walked in, and he was just getting ready to go on stage and everything to do this, and he saw me, and he came over and he hugged me, and I noticed all these people. There were like 250 people in the audience are looking at Gary as he's getting ready to walk on the stage, and I just happened to walk in late, just at the corner, and he saw me and he came over and he put a big hug on me and everything, and I noticed everybody's looking at Gary and me and thinking, who's that guy Gary's hugging? And I felt really cool about that. I thought, man, I must be special or something. And Gary always had a way of making people feel special when they probably shouldn't. You know what I mean?
Well, question for you. You know, this is a big transitional moment in Republican Party politics. Here you had a successful, I mean, if just stepping back from the whole libertarian Republican issue, you had an individual who really, in a lot of ways, represented really American exceptionalism. You had an individual who was literally a self-made man, university student, who started business, as the legend goes, while he was in college, who transformed it to a successful mechanical, HVAC business, which, by the way, I believe only really, even though he eventually sold it, only really went away, quote unquote, in terms of being Big J just a few years ago. Now, he had taken that success and he had translated that into being a successful two-term Republican governor of a state that was, in a lot of ways, financially very challenged, and also in a lot of ways was, it's a minority-majority state into a large sense. So if you're stepping back and you're looking at presidential politics, this guy, to date ourselves in terms of reference, should have been the superstar of Rent-A-Car. I mean, if nothing else, maybe not a presidential candidate, but clearly should have been brought along as someone who could potentially have a national stature. Why?
And the Republicans ignored him.
Why?
Not only ignored him, they disrespected him for that.
That's astonishing to me. Even at the time, as someone who was not involved with the Republican Party, I'm looking at this guy's profile in the 2012 race, and I'm saying, for the love of God, why, when you looked at the sort of the dribble that came out of that election, here's a guy with substance. And he is, regardless of how you feel about his politics and the campaigns, whatever, here's someone who's literally conquered just about every challenge you can as an individual and been damn good at it and made a lot of friends along the way. What went wrong?
I mean, Pat, look, Gary Johnson won as a Republican governor twice in the state of New Mexico. I'm reciting stats that are old hat.
Mm-hmm.
That is 2-1 Democrat.
Right.
He won the first time barely, and barely I say because the Green Party and the Democratic, there were 3 candidates on the ballot. He won barely the first time, but the second time it was only him and one other Democratic challenger, and he landslided that SOB. Something I learned traveling around the state with Gary since then and everything, and everything, people in New Mexico, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of what they think about philosophy, loved Gary Johnson as a governor because he surpassed all of the stereotypes and everything.
Right.
He did what was right for the state in New Mexico in his 8 years. Period. .com. End of discussion. And I was the day in Santa Fe when Gary announced that he was switching over. Well, after that event, we went like 2 blocks over to the Hotel Fondo, or I can't remember what it was. And I remember talking to a doorman, probably an illegal immigrant, as we know what the definition is right now. But at the time, he was there. And, I was talking to the guy standing outside, and I told him why I was there. And he looked at me and he goes, man, that guy Gary Johnson, I love him. I think he was a great governor. And I was thinking, I know I'm doing the right thing here. I know I'm doing the right thing with Gary Johnson. This guy was solid.
Right. So the Republican Party decided that it was a really good idea to ignore that. Was it a regional thing? Was he just too good of a guy? Was there ever any underlying consensus as to why the Republican Party decided to turn their back on someone, I believe, if he had at least gotten the nomination, maybe not won, but gotten the nomination, could have really changed the trajectory of the party? What was there any ever answer why?
All right, this is strictly my perspective, witnessing a lot of things while I was campaign manager in Florida. What transpired while trying to get him on the debate stage with 10 other people in Orlando. Strictly perspective here. There was Ron Paul already in the picture and already in the mix.
Right.
They didn't want a bookend. They didn't want somebody else on that same side, standing on one end of the corner and Ron Paul on the other end of the corner, saying the same stuff. They could marginalize one, but could they marginalize two? So what they did was marginalize the other, meaning Gary, into, no, we can't have him on the stage. Gary Johnson, out of the 13 Republican debates in 2011 and 2012 for the Republican nomination, Gary Johnson, I think, only got in 3 or 4. They came, you can Google the Gary Johnson rule. Every time Gary Johnson started to rise in numbers as far as polling data, all of a sudden the next debate changed their criteria. The Republican Party did not want 2 Liberty people speaking at the same time. Wouldn't allow it. They don't, we'll deal with Ron Paul because we know how to handle him. He's crazy Uncle Ron. He's got all the racist shit in his background. Pardon me for saying that word. Not racial, but S-H-I-T.
Right.
So, they can handle Ron Paul, but they can't handle Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
And no, damn it. The hell with his fiscal responsibility. The hell with him reaching across both sides and being a responsible governor. No. Not now, not here.
I mean, like I said, I believe if someone like Gary becomes a nominee, or at least is quote unquote allowed to make a serious run into the final stages of the nomination process, I'm repeating myself, but the entire trajectory of the Republican Party changes forever, because I think it would have been able to help keep the Ron Paul flame alive, or the Gary Johnson flame, as it were. You would have had considerable additional appeal to younger folks, as opposed to ultimately what happened when they decided to basically just screw Ron Paul at the convention. And states like Massachusetts took it upon themselves to screw Ron Paul. And then all of a sudden, you're not looking at McCain's, the usual retreads. And, even if you lose to Obama, you at least have a reasonable perspective to move forward. And then ultimately, you possibly don't have a Donald Trump. You're looking at...
To me at the time, Pat, it was a question of, to me, it was where the Republican Party took the nosedive off to the hard right.
Mm-hmm.
They took the nosedive off to the hard right because Ron Paul was extremely popular, was doing a great thing, and he had a cheerleader, he had the same guy on the side saying and doing all the right things, who quite possibly could have been a much better representative for the Republican Party, and the fact that, Democrats love the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they had to keep him out. They kept him out.
All right, so Gary makes the big jump into the Libertarian Party. 2012 predates my involvement in terms of at the convention level. You've got this ongoing litany of, and I'm not including Gary in this, but of failed Republicans, taking almost as a consolation prize the Libertarian Party movement. What
You're talking about the bar impact.
Right, exactly. So,
Right. And yeah, justifiable. Very well. You know, I have no issue. I hated Barr as a Libertarian candidate in 2008. But anyway, go ahead.
so you've got to run into 2012. Now, again, this predates my involvement. I really didn't I became a Libertarian in 2012, but the party here in Rhode Island was really post 2012 went dark for a couple of years. It wasn't active at all. Really didn't show a pulse. So what was your involvement in the 2012 campaign, and why again, someone like Gary who's got a broad-based appeal, a blue chip pedigree in terms of actually governing, at least in a libertarian style, what goes right, what goes wrong?
All right. Well, we're talking about, now we're getting to the stage where I'm in the 2012 campaign with Gary as a Libertarian candidate. And like I said, at that point, my involvement was, I became a van driver. I was driving you can look it up on Facebook. Who is Jack Galt? I had a campaign van that I made a branding and a message issue on the Facebook page. And I was just driving around the Midwest and everything. I was picking up Gary and picking up Jim Gray, and I was, traveling around all the states, 24 states in the Midwest region of the Rockies, dropping off campaign material and collateral. I was a rolling advertisement because we had the van wrapped with Gary Johnson. I made sure every place I went, I got people to sign the van, and it became it became somewhat of a more attractive thing than Gary was at times, embarrassing to me. Here was the difference. Here's what was good and what was bad. We were grassroots. We were really grassroots. We were running a presidential campaign, but we were running a presidential campaign with people around the country who didn't have a clue on just not running or being involved in a presidential campaign. They were there because they loved it. They didn't know how to stage events. They didn't know how to promote Gary coming to town, this, that, and the other thing. We had so many rookie issues, which, it was the way it was for that campaign. Mm-hmm. The beauty of it, the beauty of the 5 months I spent with Gary Johnson's campaign in 2012 was the people I met all around that region I worked with that just loved liberty, loved freedom, loved the vision that Gary Johnson presented. If you go on my Facebook page, Where is Jack Galt? My proudest moment was I was in the middle of nowhere off of I-80 or something in Wyoming at a gas stop, and I don't remember. It was like 30 miles east of Lander, Wyoming, which means nothing to anybody. Windswept, blown off gas stop. I'm filling up with gas, and some guy about 5 years my senior comes stumbling in the sense that he's hurting in pain, and he says, "Are you with the Gary Johnson campaign?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm driving the van." He says, "I got to tell you, I love that guy." I said, "Well, tell me why." And he says, "I'm a veteran of a war." And I didn't even ask him what war it was, because does it really matter at this point in our era? Because we've been in so many wars. I said, "Really, tell me why." He says, "Well, I got wounded and I got pain." And he says, "The goddamn VA is making me take morphine. They're insisting I take morphine. I don't want to do it." I don't want to do it. It's addicting. It's horrible. Gary Johnson, I'm perfectly content to smoke marijuana. Gary Johnson's the only candidate that's going to let me smoke marijuana without getting arrested. I don't want to do morphine. Please get Gary Johnson elected. I just want to be comfortable in my life.
Right.
And I was like in near tears with this guy. He was so passionate in his whole perspective about let me ingest what I want into my body. That's the American way. Mm-hmm. But the government won't let me do it.
Now, the campaign management surrounding the Gary Johnson campaigns has always been controversial. They seem to attract more than their fair share of slings and arrows. Why is that? Is it personality? Is it the Utah thing? What happened
there? It's the Utah thing. And all right, all I will say is, well, let's just leave it at this, Pat. George Phillies was correct.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
It does. And it makes sense to a lot of people listening, or who end up listening.
All right.
Fair enough.
Now, as far as the 2012 campaign, yes, the campaign did go $1 whatever million in debt, and that money was paper. It was not debt that had to be paid off. It was not debt that anybody was going to file a lien or go to court about. It was $1.5 million in debt. The issue that came about in 2016 as a result of that $1.5 million debt was whether the money raised in 2016 was going to satisfy that non-debt.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And after, God, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but yes, George Phillies was right. And I can't believe I'm saying that because I got in more fights with George Phillies throughout the 2016 campaign. I told him, I was nasty to him because I can be nasty.
I've heard that you're sharp-tongued.
Sharp tongue with a demeaning wit.
There you go.
But I'm prepared to go on, George Phillies was right.
Okay.
But, it wasn't a bad thing. Really, think about it, it wasn't a bad thing. There are people in the 2012 campaign that laid out cash and or services that went unpaid. Those people in the 2012 campaign were not going to hold anybody accountable for it because they were loyal and dedicated and noble to the cause. They didn't feel like, they needed to pursue it. There were people in the as we went into, there's late 4th of July going on here in Wellington, Florida.
No worries.
Those are not gunshots, they're fireworks.
That is.
There were people. Yeah. It's not Ron Nielsen trying to shoot me right now.
Oh my.
No, but there were people in the 2016 leading up to the 2016 campaign and convention that were irate that there was $1.5 million left over from the 2012 campaign. Mm-hmm. I thought, and I believe it. Those people did, and they didn't. They really didn't care. Now I'll say this: check the FEC reports. Did they get paid off? Yes, they did. And when I say check the FEC reports from 2016, yeah, they did. I don't think it's wrong. that they did get reimbursed. They should have.
Right.
But nevertheless.
What kind of candidate, you know, I've had the pleasure of having Judge Jim Gray on the show a number of times, particularly when his activity in fighting the war on drugs. You know, he strikes me as the consummate gentleman. He's articulate, on point, great pedigree. What kind of vice presidential candidate did you find him to be?
I absolutely, unequivocally, without any question, adore Jim Gray.
Right.
He is the most stand-up, righteous, honest, transparent human being I have ever met in my life. Loyal, and I have to emphasize loyal. Capital L-O, capital O, capital Y, capital A-L. You'll never get me to say a bad word about Jim Gray. I adore that gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
And your question was?
Well, I mean, what type of candidate? Because I find him, you know, with all the history that's happened with vice presidential candidates, and we'll get into that. I found Gray to be remarkably articulate and remarkably libertarian and remarkably. When given the opportunity to meet him, I believe he's a very compelling figure. And you know, the question that leads into one of our more obvious subjects for tonight is, you know, did he get a bum rap? Did he not get, because of financial constraints or because of strategy, did he not get the exposure that would have been so helpful for the campaign?
You mean in 2012?
Yeah.
Well, all right. First time I met Jim Gray was when I was driving the van around in 2012. And I had to go to South Dakota State University to meet Jim, pick him up, do the whole thing, and, you know, and I'm trying to think of the town. It was southeast corner. It was outside of Sioux Falls. The first time I met him, we were in a South Dakota State, and he was in the student union building in like the coffee shop, and he gave his first speech. And, you know, I didn't know Jim Gray. I didn't know what he was or anything, but, you know, and I thought the speech that he gave was dull, uninspiring. It was like a judge speaking to a jury, if you may. I wasn't impressed. About 3 months later was the next time I crossed paths with him, and it was in Montana, right before the end of the 2012 election. And again, you know, we were doing a college circuit tour, and I happened to be there, and he did the same thing. He did the same speech, and he blew my mind about, you know, and how much he improved. He learned how to be a politician on a stump and talking about all the right things and doing everything right. I was blown away. After that event, we had lunch together, and I told him, I says, Jim, Judge Gray, you just blew my mind. Your improvement, your level of presenting on a presidential campaign has improved like 300%. It was unbelievable. And he looked at me in the eye and he says, thank you, Tom. Thank you, because I know what you said in South Dakota State. It took to heart. And he was great. And I think to this day, the speeches he gives now, he just keeps getting better and better and better in talking about, you know, he's a god on the drug war. Jim Gray can blow anybody out of the water in any kind of discussion about the drug war, but he's gone beyond that now. He knows how to talk about all the issues. He knows how to project the positive things that the libertarian message is about all issues. And you know, I love the guy. He just keeps improving all the time.
And yet, to a certain degree, as we morph into 2016, perhaps because of the disappointment in the overall vote count in 12, he becomes, and this is my word, as someone who's not part of the inner circle, who just,
Well, no.
but he becomes marginalized. I mean, how?
Look, well, yeah, of course he was. Of course he was, because, Pat, you gotta understand, we were at a point in 2016, you know, we got Gary Johnson running again, and, you know, we got two lousy candidates from the other parties. We need a rainmaker.
Right.
We needed a rainmaker for 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Weld was the rainmaker. No, there's no other option. He was the rainmaker. When Bill Weld, and I'll tell you this, Judge Gray would have been the default candidate again in 2016 until Bill Weld came into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
To Jim Gray's credit, though, I mean, look, he was sadly disappointed. I know this.
Well, and he gave
wasn't so.
Well, and I think at the convention in 2016, I was there. He gave a very compelling, very gracious endorsement speech. I mean, he
Absolutely, because that's who Jim Gray is.
Mm-hmm.
He is a team player. He recognizes the big picture. He understands limitations and liabilities and opportunities. Jim Gray, I think I've expressed already. I have so much respect for that man, and even, you know, things that happened, you know, in the course of the 2016 campaign. Look, he's out there today, right now, as you and I are speaking. He's standing on a stage at Liberty Fest with Bill Weld and Gary Johnson and Nick Sarwat, because Jim Gray is that kind of guy.
Right.
If I had to go play a World Series in baseball or any sport or anything else, I want that guy, Jim Gray, on my team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Again, I find him to be a very compelling figure, and I'm hoping to get him into Rhode Island this year because, you know, again, it's a complete package: gravitas, experience, resume, and getting back to the 2016 election. That's what we attempted here in New England, to where Bill Weld was a household figure, Gary Johnson was not. Interestingly enough, when we arranged for an interview with Gary Johnson with a reporter at the Providence Journal, which is sort of Rhode Island's paper of record, if you will. You know, in its history, it's had some pretty strong moments as a newspaper. Interestingly enough, the person who interviewed him had interviewed Gary when he visited years before Rhode Island on the as far as the National Governors Association, and he had interviewed Gary here in Rhode Island. So there was an institutional memory, and we were able to parlay that. But for whatever reason, you know, the pitch in the election, in addition to being Bill Weld being the rainmaker, was the pitch of the two governors, and the notion was, and we worked it pretty hard here in Rhode Island until the blow up. We worked it pretty hard where we constantly pointed out that we had two highly competent former governors, and that if you stripped away the party labels, Libertarian, Democrat, Republican, and strictly went on the resumes of the individuals involved, the two very best people in the room were the Libertarians. You know, there was real private industry experience and there was real governance there. In your opinion, as someone who is clearly intimate with the 2016 campaign, that, particularly given the warts, if you will, how horrific the other two candidates were, what was it that prevented that message from really gaining hold? Is it just Americans' short-term attention span problem? What happened?
Okay, let me make sure I understand your question. What prevented the Johnson-Weld message of two solid governors?
Right, competence.
Taking hold in American politics?
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Pat. I think you know the answer to that.
Oh no, I do, but I'm interested in your perspective.
Well,
as someone who's up front.
it was media control.
Mm-hmm.
It was media control take it up another level, it was Hillary Clinton, Fox News, and I could easily say it was Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton control. It wasn't Donald Trump control. He's too stupid to understand how to control media. But Hillary Clinton absolutely does, and she did in 2016. The control for the Trump campaign was Fox News. Look, go back and look at the numbers from the 2016 campaign. How many times did we appear on any kind of broadcast of Fox News if it wasn't Neil Cavuto or who, Neil Cavuto, by the way, loved and adored Gary, Neil Cavuto or Kennedy? That was it on Fox News. We got once on the 5, and the 5. My God, I I felt bad for Gary because it was like Gary on the 5 with 5 people ready to throw a freaking dart in his heart. And one appearance on the 5, and then once on Megyn Kelly, who had her scripted beat the shit out of Gary thing question. And but then for the most part in 2016, all of our national appearances were on MSNBC and CNN because they thought we were taking the votes away from Trump.
Right.
It's all media, Pat. Come on.
Well, and my frustration was the campaign, and I'm not going to personalize it because I didn't work in anything remotely near the inner circle like you did. But my frustration was the absence of any real presence in regional media, because I understand what's at work intimately with trying to get national airtime. Many of for folks who talk about bias, to me, many of the people who appear at the national level are not unlike wrestling types. They adopted a persona, they adopted a shtick, they adopted a role, and that's the role that makes them a living. What they actually think, what they actually believe in, is completely unrelated. Hannity this time decided early on that he was going to jump on the Trump bandwagon, and we'll let history decide how that worked out for him. Every one of them, Maddow, all of them, they pick and choose like horse racing. To me, the inability to get the candidates out to regional media, which could have made something of a difference, perhaps enough to get the numbers up enough to at least try to get, have a better case for getting in the first debate, was the most disappointing.
Pat, we didn't discount regional media, but understand, we had to take advantage every opportunity we had of national media. Mm-hmm. And, when I say national media, it goes beyond the CNN and the MSNBC and the Fox. It also goes into the radio stations. Right. It goes into the print media, to a degree, the blog and video media, which has been growing at that time. We had to go to sources mm-hmm. or opportunities that presented greater numbers with Gary and Bill. I mean, I get that. The whole regional thing. But you gotta consider the time restraints and opportunities that were present at the time. And look, between 2012 and 2016, my perspective and watching it all, my God, we got a ton of national media in 2016. We got nothing, absolutely. We couldn't even get regional media in 2012, but we got tons of national media in 2016, tons of it.
Now, I'm going to jump offline here for a second and go out of line. You're right. The earned media counts for the 2016 are exponentially higher than probably the first 40 years of the party combined. No doubt about it.
Oh, right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. So now, one of my big beefs, and as someone who's become more active in the party since 2016, is roll forward to 2018 for a second. I want to get back to Gary. And I have a feeling you and I could spend hours on these issues. But do you believe, as someone who has been intimate to national campaigns for a number of years, do you believe we've used whatever head of steam we had coming out of 2016 adequately in post 2016 through the current day?
You're presenting you're making a presumption that we've had a lot of national media attention since the Gary Johnson campaign. We haven't. We haven't had. Yeah, look. It's not Pat. What a lot of people have to understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a case of, well, Gary Johnson had a ton of national media in 2016. We're going to maintain that, run beyond the campaign. No, we've been shut off. We've been cut off from that national media. Look, I talk to Nick Sarwalk all the time, and I think Nick is one of the best presenters of the Libertarian. I think Nick should be a national candidate because I've watched him. I've watched him in studio interviews. I've watched him with media, as limited as they are. He does a great job, but unless those are, it's not like we can call up MSNBC or call up CNN or call up Fox and say, hey, can we get Nick or we get the chair of the party on your show? They're not even going to take the call. They're just not going to take the call. They took the call in 2016 because in the case of MSNBC and CNN, we were an alternative to Gary Johnson. Fox took the call because they felt like, well, we might as well just let Gary on here and we'll make a fool out of him. Mm-hmm. The same opportunities are not there right now. Yeah, do I think would I love to see Nick or whoever the chairman is in front all the time? Yeah. I told them, I said, let's get you out more. It's just not that easy. They're very difficult not to crack.
Well, it's something we've managed to do here locally in regional media, and perhaps I'm using
sure.
the wrong microscope, but quite frankly, when I look at the regional media landscape in the Northeast, we as a party, as a movement, and God bless Larry Sharp for all the work that he does, and I know Dan Fishman.
I love Larry. Larry to me is the future of the party. Larry and Nick are the future of the party.
Like I said, Larry's the future of the party. We'll digress there for a moment. And I think Dan Fishman has worked very hard as trying to create a profile in Massachusetts. By the way, if you're just listening to this, Dan Fishman is running for General Auditor for the state Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I commend him to your attention. And we're going to do whatever we can as we get closer to Election Day in Rhode Island to give media across the border to the folks in the Attleboroughs and Fall River and New Bedford and the south coast of Massachusetts. He is a wonderful person, a wonderful candidate, and needs more media attention, which is why I get back to this whole picture of chairmen in states getting together and trying to create some type of collective energy to get behind some of the great candidates. We've got a wonderful guy running for Senate in New Jersey. We've got a great guy running for governor of Illinois. On and on and on. We've got a great success story going on down in Florida. And we've got some wonderful people up in New Hampshire. The absence of a collective effort to popularize those individuals and get their backstory out to libertarians across the nation, to me, is a singular disappointment in the current administration. I frankly don't believe that the chairman is the least important person in the room. I'm not going to say he should be the most important, but damn it, he should be up there. We've only got a couple minutes left, and I want to continue this again in a couple weeks. But we've got to touch on the third rail, and that, of course, is weld. Getting back to the conversation, 2016, there's a recognition that you need a rainmaker, that you need someone who's going to generate interest amongst the moneyed class. Clearly, too, you finally bring into the Northeast someone who's well respected in the Northeast as a former governor and as someone who's strongly involved in the legal community. Someone who, you know, I can remember in 2016 during the convention, I mentioned to our, you know, the gentleman who's running, you know, the local, the Rhode Island, if you will, talk show of record, and asked Mr. York if he'd be interested in an interview. Jumped all over the notion of getting Bill Weld on the radio, and we got him live on the radio from from the convention floor onto Rhode Island radio, and it became like any other small regional market. It became a celebrated event. Incredibly enough, that was the last time I had access to Bill Weld, until literally 3 days before the election. And so we failed, I believe, you know, and I understand he had a presence in Massachusetts, but, you know, even as poorly as Skype may have worked for us tonight, telecommunication methods are such that I'm not expecting Bill Weld or Judge Jim Gray or Gary Johnson, for that matter, to show up in Rhode Island. It's not a battleground state. It's a small state. It's very blue. We get that. What's frustrating is the lack of access to them, even on a digital basis. And I'm not talking about through a kind of a niche show like this, but we've got earned media contacts in this state, and I could get, during the election, and even on certain issues now, national libertarians into quote-unquote regional media. And there is little or no effort to do that. The person who's best at it is Larry Sharp, who we joke here will attend the opening of an envelope, and that of course is a tribute to him. That's we agree with you. But we've got Weld. It's 2016. We all went to the gala. I think in a move equally as magnanimous as Judge Jim Gray's endorsement speech of Weld, Larry Sharp, minutes after being denied by the slimmest of margins the vice presidential nomination, shows up to the gala, gives a compelling speech, and spends the next 2 hours, despite walking away from a bitter defeat, doing what's right for the party, which is raising money. Bill Weld enters the campaign. What goes right, what goes wrong? Did we lose you? Joe, do we have technical troubles there?
No, we're fine. I mean, we're on.
Well, I think we lost him. Either that or he hung up on me. I don't think so.
Right, want to just wrap the show?
What's that, buddy?
Want to just wrap the show?
Well, I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight then. I think we're going to pick this up. No, there you go. Again, technology at its best. Folks, we're going to take a break now for the evening. I'm going to try to get Tom Mann, I'll always call him on. Tom Mann on again in the next week or so. The ultimate question left hanging, the one that we were working up to all evening. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course our flagship, CoalitionRadio.us. I want to thank folks for joining in tonight. Again, a big shout out to our sponsors. Air Sciences, Darryl Gould and his hearty band of folks fighting for mold remediation, biohazards, making your home, your office, your school as safe and clean and environmentally sound as it can be. Beacon Shipping and Logistics, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT, beaconshippinglogistics.com, bringing you worldwide expertise in automobile shipping right here to your home in Warwick, Rhode Island. Whether it be that car you buy on eBay, whether it be that special auto that may have been Aunt Sally's that you're sending out to university because she's not going to use it anymore. Maybe it's that special deal on that leftover 2017. Use the brand that dealers use nationwide. BeaconShippingandLogistics.com. And of course, how can I forget? Yacht Club Soda. Rhode Island's boutique soda. It was a boutique soda 103 years ago before we even knew we needed boutique sodas. natural flavors, none of the refinery aspects of soda. You know, again, this is the barbecue season. Hopefully you're having your wonderful time with family and friends. Don't buy the plastic chemicals in the bottle. Get the very best. You're gonna spend a lot of time cooking for friends and family this summer. If an alcoholic beverage is not their choice, they're looking for something cold and refreshing that tastes like soda used to, Yacht Club Bottling Works. That's it for this evening. A big thank you for all my guests. And as always, hashtag take it personally. We'll see you next week. See if we can pick it up with Tom again.